Liam, just one thing we've been talking about in terms of getting through today. What we'll do is we'll just go right through to the end of your case, and then we'll break for lunch.
Yeah.
That may, whenever that occurs, we certainly want to finish today.
Yeah.
And then I think that after lunch, we'll hear back from the council experts. But just thinking about the amount of information they've been assimilating, we do need to give a bit more time than just 3/4 of an hour. So let's review things at that stage.
Yeah.
And then, we're programmed to sit through to 4:45 or 5, but we will finish today. Just signaling anyone that has to leave, just take your leave for a plane or whatever. But that's the plan. Okay. Thank you. Right, we'll let you carry on and try not to interrupt too much.
You want me to speed up a little bit, or?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, we've been through some key matters, so just speed up.
3.17. In relation to the mitigation and traffic safety effects, the requester suggests that all potential traffic safety effects can be appropriately managed through the resource consent process. As part of that, the requester suggests the first point relates to that discretionary rule, so the council has discretion to address the safety effects as part of that discretionary rule. Second point, the existing district plan financial contributions provisions could be used to collect contributions to upgrade the intersection. The requester also suggests that crossing for pedestrian cyclists could be installed near the intersection when the State Highway 2 speed limit is lowered and or within the existing K zone to the south. One disagrees. In response to the requester's submission that appropriate management of effects have been carefully considered at the resource consent stage, admits that its plan change provisions are simply inadequate to allow that. If not allow for traffic safety effects to be adequately addressed at the resource consent stage. Reasons that are controlled activity status incorrectly indicates that significant resource management issues have already been addressed, like with part 2. Day's evidence that the plan change does not adequately address the traffic safety effects. This point's been covered. There's no ability to define resource consent and traffic safety effects are not satisfactorily addressed. The district plan rules do not contain any scope for wider transport effects or traffic safety effects to be assessed at the resource consent stage. In particular, while the amended retirement village land use rule allows traffic safety effects to be considered as a matter of control, any resource consent condition which requires the intersection to be upgraded may be challenged as unreasonable. Such a condition could frustrate the consent, as it would be dependent on what we're able to implement changes to the intersection. The evidence of Mr. Aman discusses how the discretionary subdivision rule does not apply to the plan change site, that it does not have physical or legal access to State Highway 2. Mr. Aman has also not seen the discretionary rule applied in practice in that way. And I also note, I think it was Ms. Barr, but I couldn't quite hear who was who yesterday, saying that the council does not apply the approach in practice. That as the approach suggested by the personal practice. Would it be useful to address the legal meaning of access at that point now?
Yes, please.
But my starting point would be that you need to be able to understand the rule on space. Plan users should be able to go into a plan and work out which which rule applies to the activity that they want to undertake. There is case law that says one seeks first to give words in a plan their plain ordinary meaning, It is, and it's only where there is doubt or uncertainty that resort may be had to other relevant parts of the plan, and in particular, the objectives and policies. It is my submission that the ordinary plain meaning of the word access is direct access. Access implies only one step to get there. Having to transfer a subdivision is not access. Wakakotahi submits the application of the rule is clear and there is no need to look at objectives and policies to determine its application. There is also not any indication in the rule that you need to go and look at objectives and policies. Plan users should not have to work out which objectives, firstly work out which objectives and policies apply. You go and look at them. Even if that view is wrong and the meaning is unclear, council has not been applying the rule in the way Welhom suggests.
You got that written down?
I do, but only in no form.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just
But I can
tidy those notes up and send it to us. We supplementary would be good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Moving on to point D. Wakakotahi understands the request and considers that it would be impractical for a resource consent applicant not to notify Wakakotahi. Wakakotahi agrees. However, the reality is that the request law cannot control future applicants' decisions. In addition, it is too uncertain whether there is scope for Wakakotahi to be limited notified as thinking about this 95A and 95B sections, that would not be an effective person, and council may not consider special circumstances exist. As the plan change provisions are currently drafted, a resource consent applicant would have no obligation to notify or consult Wakakotahi. This means Wakakotahi will have no right to participate in any discussion of the intersection being upgraded by being the road controlling authority.
I've got a question of clarification. Just
Sure.
the term as currently drafted, does that reference the revised provisions that were received yesterday?
Yes, although I should qualify it a little bit. Perhaps I would delete the word or consult, because what they need to be, but the outcomes of any consultation need to be included in the RTO.
Yes.
Yes.
Just on that, and there's probably a question for Ms. St. Ahmed, but I'll just signal it now. What I'm interested in is if an application came in under the current provisions, that failed to address that assessment matter that's been suggested by Mr. Lewandowski, which is the outcomes of consultation with Wakakotahi. I guess first and foremost, from a legal perspective, would that be reason to refuse the application for acceptance under Section 88?
Do you mean not including?
Yes.
Outcomes?
Would it be sufficient to deem the application incomplete, and the council would then return the application to the applicant and ask them to start again?
If it didn't include what had been done in resolved consultation, is that what can be done also might include rejecting.
Yes, because Amendment 6 talks about information schedule to accompany an application. Roman numeral 2 is an ITA that includes clause E if the outcomes of consultation. And so there's a clear signal that that the application need to include that information, and wouldn't that be a basis to reject the acceptance of the application under Section 88?
Only if consultation hasn't occurred and been described.
Yes.
That.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If on the other hand, if there had been consultation and Wakakotahi's view was not taken on board, that wouldn't be a Section 88 matter, would it? The way it was drafted.
No.
You just have to report the outcomes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see Ms. St. Ahmed nodding, so I think you understand where I'm heading in there. Yeah. Yes.
What are you asking?
Yes. Well, let's speed things up because I'm on I've got some questions for you this after later, but that was one of them. Yes. Precisely. Yeah, it's a tick box. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Yes. Just to save me asking you again this afternoon or whenever you're on, let's assume that the box is ticked and that there is information on consultation. Presumably that doesn't preclude the council from seeking further information under section 92 on the nature of that consultation and further information on traffic safety effects. Yes, okay, that's useful. Thanks.
So I'll pick up point two, deeply. Any works within a state highway require prior approval from Wakaputahi. If Wakaputahi wasn't involved in the resource consent process and the conditions, both sets of conditions are consistent with each other. There is a significant lack of detail in the structure plan provided as part of the plan change. If traffic safety effects are proposed to be mitigated as recommended by the requestor's ITA, but this is currently inadequate. In addition, the involvement of Wakaputahi in the ITA is limited by the effect that there is no ability to define. Yeah. 3.20 Wakaputahi submits that the commissioners must assess whether effects will be adequately mitigated as part of this plan change, rather than leaving this consideration to the reasons consent stage. This is along the lines of the question you asked the Great Lakes Regional Council before. This is because the commissioners must assess whether the plan change is in accordance with the council's function to control effects. 31. Assess whether the plan change is in accordance with the purpose of the RMA. I continue to read that out, but keywords being well-being, health and safety, and mitigating adverse effects. Section C is a wordy point, but essentially it says commissioners must, as part of looking at the section 32 evaluation of whether provisions are effective in achieving the objective, and the objective of the district plan being providing for urban expansion where such growth does not adversely affect safe use and development of land, roads, and infrastructure. As part of assessing whether the district plan as proposed to be amended by the plan change will give effect to the RPS policies. So propose to read those out into different policies. 3.21, the evidence of Mr. St. Armand is that the plan change does not adequately control or mitigate effects on people and community well-being and safety. Section 5. Plan change does not adequately control or mitigate effects on infrastructure that is significant in the region. Plan change is inconsistent with part 2 of the RMA objective SLD 4 of the district plan and relevant policies of the RPS. In addition, current plan provisions and proposed plan provisions as part of this plan change do not allow for transport safety effects to be adequately addressed at the resource stage. Move on to financial contributions. Ms. St. Armand's evidence is that applying the financial contributions requires that there be budgets in place to contribute to the upgrade. There be confirmation of what upgrades are required in order to apportion contribution costs, and that these upgrades be identified on the structure plan. Finding the factors to the plan change, Ms. St. Armand considers that financial contributions provisions will not help to facilitate structure upgrade of the intersection, as there is no business case funding available for one phase. The contributions would only go to the council. There is no confirmation of what upgrades are required, and there is no structure plan which sets out the details of an upgrade. Wakaputahi also submits the crossing that transport users cannot be relied upon as mitigation of effects, as there are no current plans to install such a crossing. And both the requestor and Wakaputahi agree that crossing is not appropriate or safe in this location given the current speed of the road. Moving to speed limit change, I don't intend to quote that. That sets out the requester's position. And in response, there was a bit of discussion about chicken and egg situation on Wednesday, in terms of the speed limit change being one and the infrastructure changes being another, and which one goes first. Wakakotahi's submission is that it is not a case of the chicken or the egg. In short, the changes, the infrastructure changes need to go first for the speed limit change.
You're not referring to the current review of speed, though, are you? There, you're from 100 to 80 as part of the IPSM process. You're referring to any future change below 80, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, make that point there, and make the road look and feel 50 kilometers an hour until the road needs to be changed to look and feel 50 kilometers an hour for the speed limit changes. Despite increased housing in the vicinity of the intersection, it is evidence of Mr. Connolly that the road still has a rural appearance. And commissioners, if you have the figures in front of you that we handed out earlier, I will draw your attention to this will be discussed later. Particular figures 3 to 5. No medium government. The evidence of this fate is that there is an opportunity for the requestor to work with Wakakotahi to implement an appropriate infrastructure upgrade and align this with the next round speed management review. That opportunity does not work in the context of resource consent application, as this is a separate process too, and does not align with Wakakotahi's statutory processes. Move on to section 4. Wakakotahi is not anti-housing and considered the plan change site with certain qualities which may make it an appropriate location for Masterton's urban expansion in the future. However, the assessment of the site as an appropriate location should be determined as part of the upcoming district plan review, and it essentially is scheduled that assessment is scheduled. While accepting that the commissioners need to assess the plan change on its merits, Wakakotahi submits the district plan view as the appropriate place to consider the plan change, as the review can assess whether the site is an appropriate location for urban expansion and allow for an assessment of integrated transport options, what upgrade would be appropriate overall. It can also align with Wakakotahi business case and speed management approaches, so that Wakakotahi can fund any upgrades and get change speed limits. And it can allow for district-wide decisions to be made which align with the structure of Wakakotahi's functions. I also note that the commissioner's comments in the Arvida resource consent decision that the time to consider whether the land should be developed regardless of its use was when the district plan was reviewed.
What's that context? So that's not us as commissioners, that's the Avida commissioners.
Correct.
So what do they mean there? The time to consider, is that the Avida land or for the land we're talking about?
The Arvida land. So the Arvida land was zoned industrial.
Yes.
And they are saying that time to consider whether it should be developed, regardless of whether that's for a retirement village, say residential, etc., was back when the district plan was reviewed and the zoning was put in place. Industrial zone.
Okay, so that was thinking the district plan, not the current upcoming district plan,
Yeah, historical district.
the operative district plan.
Yeah, that was reviewed.
Okay. So they weren't saying Avida shouldn't be developed until the new district plan was notified. They're looking at the past district plan. Okay.
Correct.
Good. So if I put the operative district plan for the
Sure.
when the past district plan was reviewed, something like that, that would be accurate.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That for the framework, among evidence thoroughly considered relevant planning documents. She makes the conclusions set out here. read those out.
Mm.
Moving to the government policy statement, and I'll also discuss the marks and draft district plan. The request also suggests that one of the ways concerns are driven by its road to zero strategy, and that this, and I should probably update this based on the supplementary submissions. I don't want to misquote, but I think they said remains relevant because it cannot be ignored or. Oh, sorry, remains relevant because it's a management plan. I think it's the strategy fit under another act. GPS is to be delivered through the implementation of New Zealand's road to zero strategy. What the Portage's approach to this plan change aligns with those documents. I think I can get 5.3 and 5.4.
Yes.
That was in the context of back when there was more of a dispute. I don't understand there being a dispute.
No. I think Mr. The council for the question said specifically referenced the those documents as matters to be considered under 74(2)(b).
I'll move to 5.5. The space evidence explains the government's priorities expressed with the GPS and introduces the same system approach. The state and Mr. Connolly concluded that the plan change would not align with the safe system approach and the GPS because of adverse traffic safety effects and predicted. Mr. Connolly considers the request or suggested safety management traffic mitigation does not align with the safe system approach, as it does not address the potential of significant adverse effects development enabled by the plan change, and it accepts that some death and serious injuries could occur are acceptable. Instead, Mr. Connolly concludes that a fundamental review of the intersection and how it will integrate with plan growth needs to be undertaken to enable the state highway to be designed and operated safely and to avoid the risk of these sites. Moving on to the master and urban growth strategy and this draft district plan. The request all considers these are relevant consideration and that they provide useful insight into future urban development area. What the Portage considers these documents do not provide a useful or helpful insight, as they have no statutory weight and do not fall within any of the categories of the documents listed in 74. I make that statement despite the supplementary submissions of Welhom. As my next point says, in particular, the MUGS is not a council adopted strategy, as suggested by, again, I think it was this bar. Secondly, it was not prepared under the LGA, Local Government Act, as suggested, as it was prepared by Bottomsville.
Can we? Yeah, I think that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? Like, obviously, Bottomsville weren't doing it for fun, were they? They were being commissioned under a brief by a council in terms of their general working responsibilities under the LGA.
I agree. I would say that it holds less weight when you compare it to a strategy that was actually prepared.
But you say it has no weight.
I think it's relevant, but I'm not sorry. I don't think it's. Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Bullen, your paragraph 5.9 starts off by saying that it has no weight, and then you go on to say that if we find come to a different view, when you said then it's about what weight we put on it, but to say that it has no weight because it was prepared by a consultant working on behalf of the council seems a bit of a stretch. So I think that's what we're saying.
Okay.
Accept that.
I would say I agree. I would say it has less weight than if it was prepared by the council themselves or adopted by the council.
Well, they're two different things. Can we agree that who it was prepared by, whether it was prepared by council staff or whether it was prepared by a consultant engaged by council staff is really not relevant. The fact that it was commissioned by the council is the key point, isn't it?
Sure, happy to agree.
Thank you.
Are you happy to strike out the words as it was prepared by Boffin Miskell, not the council?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I'll move on.
Yes,
Yes, the commissioners do consider the documents are relevant as a strategy prepared under another act, or because it cannot be ignored. I suggest this is a weaker obligation than the other must obligations. It is also weaker than the shall have regard to category that applies to the GPS.
The GPS. You've got you.
Yes, sorry, that should be GPS.
Yes.
Mr. Amar considers the plan changes inconsistent with those various documents that the commissioners must consider. Doing is in the NPCD. In addition, both documents, by that I mean MUGs and draft district plan, have not robustly considered whether the site is an appropriate place for urban expansion, including the readiness of the transport environment, as I note the MUG sets out current development opportunities, which includes the Arvida site, and that's before it had received resource consent, but only shows the plan change site as a potential future urban expansion area. And it also notes that it would require rezoning. We addressed the next point. Draft district plan has undergone public consultation, but the results of that are unknown. I'm not sure what stage that's at, but I wondered if it would be helpful to give a summary of feedback on the draft district plan. That would be helpful for the commissioners. A job for the council, obviously, I'm not sure if that's available.
Megan, has there been a summary of submissions on the draft district plan?
Yeah, I understand that there has been work done in that area with the feedback closing on the 6th of December.
Yes.
Would you like me to organise for that to be available?
I don't know how helpful it's really going to be.
Must be academic. Can't have it both ways. That's either relevant.
I suppose it would be of interest to see if there's any specific submissions either way on this particular part of Masterton, because I think it was shown as a fuzz area in the draft district plan, wasn't it?
Yes, and I am going to some more detail around that in my statement as part of the chronology list.
Yes, yes. So I'm just looking if there's a schedule of we submitted on that, what the points were. That's
Actually,
around that
feedback.
fuzz. Yeah. Thank you, Len.
Thank you. This next paragraph is in response to questions of Mr. Georgeson about the site being in the Pōpaki future development area. And in terms of the letter, and which was caveated, and whether the plan change site was included in the future development area at the time of that letter. The document appended to the letter. The plan change site is outside of the future development area in the district plan, and as far as the Whakatane is aware, including in 2009, the letter is written, always has been. Plan change, and Ms. Alman will choose that. The plan change site is not just a logical expansion of the future development area that is to be considered within the context of the current transport network. Instead, it is a significant step change that will more than double the vehicle movement using the intersection. And I also heard the question for, I can't remember her name, but Greater Wellington Regional Council about the force of
Okay. Yes.
I would say that. The preliminary nature of the MUGs and the draft district plan also demonstrates that the appropriate site and the intersection of further urban development the matter to be more properly addressed as part of the district review. I intend to skip 6.1, 6.2.
Mm.
And start with, in 6.3, say Armand comments that the plan change does not achieve the sustainable management purpose of the RMA. It does not manage the use development section of State Highway 2 in a manner that provides for the health and safety of people and communities and avoids, remedies, or mitigates adverse effects on users of the State Highway. I move to relief sought for the reasons set out in its submission, evidence and above. Whakakotahi opposes the plan change and seeks that it be declined. And that is my submission.
Thank you. David, do you have any questions?
I have a number of questions that I'm going to put to Ms. Armand, and I don't, because you're largely parroting her, I don't think there's a lot gained for that, but there are two things I just want to put to you. First is your paragraph 320. And the first part of that paragraph, and from a transportation issue perspective, do you stand by that statement as being accurate as to what the tests are for this panel?
3.20.
Yes.
Through.
No, just in terms of the chapeau of that paragraph, you say that Whakakotahi submits that the commissioners must assess whether the effects will be adequately mitigated as part of the plan change. That seems to be a resource consent type test, as opposed to a plan change test. And you would have, you may not have heard me on the first day because I understand the sound wasn't too great in the very initial section, but I canvassed this matter at the very start by saying that the issue in front of the panel was, in the first instance, whether there was any fundamental impediment to the plan change occurring. And I cited examples such as natural hazards, servicing, policy direction, and transportation type matters. And I said that if the answer to that was the affirmative, then really that was potentially the end of the matter. But that if the answer was no, the emphasis then shifted to whether the provisions of the plan change set up an appropriate process to adequately manage those effects. And I'm just wondering whether you disagree with that categorization of the issue that's in front of us in light of what you've said at 320.
I agree. I think my submissions could be reworded, and it's similar to what you suggested before.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, thank you for that.
yeah, I would say must assess whether the plan change provisions allow effects to be.
Yes. Thank you for that. And my very final question, just clarification, and that's in relation to your last page, paragraph 7.1. And that's the result that Whakakotahi is seeking, is that the plan change be declined. Is there any secondary relief, or is it solely primary relief that Whakakotahi are asking for?
I would say there is secondary relief. Say our mind can address what the
Yes.
um
Yes, and it goes along the lines of, in the event that primary relief is not granted, and sometimes submissions are tailored in that way. But obviously, the preference of well, I don't want to put words in your, is the preference for Whakakotahi that the plan change be declined.
yes.
Thank you. And you're happy for us to discuss secondary relief with Ms. St. Armand?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, David. I have one question, and it is again around 320. I think, with that change you made at the start, this is a very helpful sort of analysis. And what I wanted to, this is a planning and a legal question. So we're talking about the purpose of the RMA and B, and there's a purpose in the Act which we all have to follow in making plans and making decisions. You've highlighted the well-being and for the health and safety. And then there's also a menu at the end, isn't there? Avoiding, remedying or mitigating any adverse effects. Those are the options that you look at when you're dealing with effects. I'd like you to contrast that with the objective of the plan change over the page and see. But I think the objective you're citing is from the district plan, is that right?
That's objective SLB4,
SLD4.
SLB4.
Okay. When you look at that objective, it's a pretty simple statement, isn't it? It's to provide for urban expansion where such growth does not adversely affect. That's it's a different type of test, isn't it? Is that a higher test, do you think? Does not adversely affect?
I would have said a higher test. It almost needs to. It almost needs to almost meet a condition and then which may sound similar to an avoid type test. I'm not sure.
So you think it's sort of moving towards that avoid effects type position? I'm not wanting to put words in your mouth, but this to me is a key decision-making point for us, looking at the objective and how it's framed. And I think we've heard from the requester that essentially is the objective they're following for the plan change.
Yeah, I don't know if saying avoid is.
No, it's not as far as avoid. Okay, it's not helpful. We'll talk to Catherine about that as well, because there's in a plan change situation. When you're plan making, you are looking to avoid remedy mitigate effects on the way through, but in applying a plan, you're also doing the same through resource consent processes. But yes, that's just something I'm pondering. Thank you.
That's it.
Right, let's carry on.
Okay, we'll move to Ms. Spate.
Thank you.
Understand she's prepared a summary statement which has been circulated.
Yes.
And to parties in the room.
Yep.
Ms. Spate was going to read out that statement.
No, please, Emma, if you could read it out.
Yep.
I've heard your voice a few times on the radio.
So, sorry, I just didn't quite catch that. So you're expecting me to read through the submission, the summary?
Yes, please. No, the summary.
Yes.
Yes.
Kia ora.
You are breaking up a bit there, Emma.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, just carry on. You're a bit. What we might do is we might get you to turn off your video because there's
Sure.
looks like there's a little bit of a connection issue. Okay.
My full name's Emma Catherine Spate. I'm employed by Waka Kotahi as the Director of Regional Relationships for the Wellington region and top of the South Island. My evidence outlines the statutory functions and obligations of Waka Kotahi and aspects of the wider transport planning system and the funding of that system, such as the government policy statement. A key intersection, Cashmere Oaks and State Highway 2, will be impacted by conversion of the site to a residential zone and its subsequent development. I've read the Section 42A report and understand that the plan change does not propose to upgrade transport infrastructure in the area, and that traffic safety experts for Waka Kotahi have a different view of the safety implications of future development compared to the traffic safety experts for the requester. The key outcomes sought by Waka Kotahi in relation to the plan change have consistently been as follows: To ensure safe and appropriate roading infrastructure that aligns with local and central government strategies such as the MPSUD, GPS and regional policy direction. Development is allowed where effects on the transport network can be and will be avoided, remedied or mitigated by developers at their cost without putting pressure on public funding. The requester does not intend to mitigate the traffic effects or address transport issues directly or establish a clear pathway in the district plan to require these outcomes. The ways in which public funding is available for transport infrastructure upgrades and transformation is understood, and decisions affecting transport infrastructure consider these implications. And I can go into more detail on that if necessary, because I know some of the issues relate to the timing and process for speed changes and how that happens, and the interaction with infrastructure changes, which I can come back to.
Emma, we'll draw that out in a few questions, I think.
Sure.
Yep.
Waka Kotahi is supportive of housing developments, providing the development demonstrates it's consistent with the relevant government strategies and invests in appropriate and safe transport infrastructure to mitigate any adverse effects. And that is borne out in the GPS, which has a strategic priority of better travel options, which includes those aspects. Overall, Waka Kotahi is not fundamentally opposed to additional development, pushing the northern extent of the Masterton urban boundary further northwards if it is needed, so long as transport infrastructure is provided to meet the needs of the future community that will live and work there. I note that the earliest of advice to Welhom, Somerset, and prior to discussing potential for any speed management, Waka Kotahi identified infrastructure upgrades to the intersection as a necessary step in response to additional development. The concerns outstanding in relation to the plan change are therefore as follows. Firstly, there's ongoing urban development without any integrated transport infrastructure options in place. Secondly, significant transport and traffic and transport safety issues arise as a result of the increase in development at this location, including for pedestrians and cyclists. Thirdly, it appears that ongoing development at this location without a safety intervention will continue an unwelcome trend of the Wellington region having a high rate of deaths and serious injuries. Fourthly, there's no identified public project to improve infrastructure, which development now will put significant financial pressure on road controlling authorities for future upgrade works, which are not currently required with the road in its current state. And finally, a significant urban development at this location is at odds with the One Network framework. Making further changes to the speed requires changes to the road environment first, and if this is done, Waka Kotahi could support changes to the speed. So the speed of State Highway 2 in the vicinity of the intersection is expected to change from 100 kilometres an hour to the safe and appropriate speed of 80 kilometres an hour through the implementation of the interim speed management plan. No or very little infrastructure change is required to make this change in the speed. And the interim speed management plan is expected to be certified in the next month or so and implemented by 1 July 2024. Conversely, a 50 kilometre an hour speed limit would require an infrastructure change, and that would look like things such as an intersection upgrade, footpaths, bike lanes, curb and channel, lighting that signal that change and that drivers would experience as they come into that area. An intersection upgrade would enable a speed reduction to be considered in the upcoming speed management plan that's scheduled for implementation from 2024. Now, the Director of Land Transport will be shortly outlining the timeframes and steps for that, but what is required is that those plans have been, draft plans have been released, consulted on, submitted to the Director for certification and certified by 1 July 2024, and implementation would then take place over the next 3 years. Waka Kotahi faces significant funding pressures, and any investment in this corridor must have a business case, be regionally prioritised through the Regional Transport Committee, and then demonstrate a high level of contribution to national goals in order to be funded from the National Land Transport Fund. As none of this work has been done to date, National Land Transport Fund investment would be unlikely in the current and next National Land Transport Program periods.
Thank you, Emma. We'll see whether, and we have read your full evidence as well, so we'll see if David has any particular questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pate. Nothing particularly from me, but it was very, very good for you to update us on the when a decision is going to be made under the ISMP and when the implementation date of that might be. I've written down 1st of July 2024. So thank you for that.
You don't have anything else?
Okay.
No, I think I just had a question about, there's a new GPS underway at the moment. Is that what I've read through the media?
Correct.
And just give us the timeframes for that, Emma.
So the Prime Minister announced on Monday that the GPS, so the draft GPS is going to be changed. So it already had signals released previously. And so we don't have a timeline for the new draft. We're expecting it to be around May. And then that draft GPS will generally be finalised in the first quarter of 2024 for implementation from 1 July 2024. Obviously, there's also an election between now and then, so that sometimes after an election, that process undergoes further change, and that timeline could get pushed out by up to 3 months if that's the case. But the wider funding context is very challenging at the moment, and in terms of the ability of Waka Kotahi to pay for something, if it was identified and prioritised through the normal processes, would still be very constrained in terms of the activity class that this could be funded from.
Okay. Can you tell us, in terms of the current GPS, which I know quite well, strong emphasis on multimodal transport and particularly public transport and walking and cycling, you're not expecting any change to that fundamental direction in that regard, or is that something that you won't know until you see the draft?
We won't know for certain till we see the draft, and that is something that is always dependent on the government of the day as to the final form of that. If I the activity classes, so for example, currently the State Highway Improvements activity class declines from a range of 100 million to 1.25 billion in the first year of the current GPS to around 300 to 450 million in the over the 10-year period of that GPS. So that means the board must make its decisions giving effect to that over the whole country, knowing that the funding pool is declining significantly. Now, if that was to be changed in some way, that may give the board certainly more scope to fund improvements such as this on the state highway. And similarly, walking and cycling currently is increasing in the GPS from a relatively small base. And there's also other funding through Crown funding, such as the SURF Fund, the Climate Emergency Response Fund. But we have no projects from Masterton in this area. We have them in other areas of Masterton.
Yes. Okay. But my final question is about just the whole working together sort of thing between councils, agencies looking to develop housing and the Crown through your role, Emma. Is it common or normal practice to look at an area like this and work together for a like a strategic plan going forward, and some people funding some parts through maybe financial contribution, some through a developer contribution, and some through the Crown? Is that something that you work on?
We do work with councils, developers, and other parties across all parts of that land transport and integrated urban planning environment, and depending on the process that is being followed and also the location and the type of development, different arrangements can be put in place. But we always have to recognise in those processes the different statutory and governance arrangements and decision-making arrangements that each party is subject to. So if we look at a very big initiative such as Let's Get Wellington Moving, the Crown has agreed with local government on a particular apportionment of costs for those developments, whereas in much smaller intersection upgrades and so on, we can and do have a range of things within the statutory frameworks and development contributions. I'm not an expert in, but I know there are particular rules about who can take them, hold them, and apply them. But we have had developers fund their own infrastructure on a state highway with our agreement, because obviously we're the road controlling authority, or we have agreed in some cases for a split with a local government where we're both looking to see a particular improvement. So we do work extensively across the country to understand the planning environment and work together on what's possible.
Yes, that's certainly my experience over the years, and that's why I wanted to just ask you that question. That particularly if this area is growing over time, there's probably going to be at some stage a need to have some coming together or working together with the various parties. We just need to make sure that we make our decision with the best information available and knowing that background. So thank you for that, Emma. I don't have any more questions. We can carry on.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day. Right.
Mr. Conley,
Thank you.
ready for summary statement. I understand this correction main evidence.
Let's do that now.
Printed yet, but people,
Oh, we've got the main evidence.
yeah, I'm happy to speak from here, but
Yeah.
once it's been good.
Why don't you pop over here, because we might not pick up the audio very well.
Emily's printed evidence has been.
We've got a summary with headers in. Yes. So what would you like to correct?
In my evidence and sheet,
Yes.
there is a couple of figures where the line work has shifted with the formatting. So first one is, I think, page 9.
Page 22.
That's correct. Let's see if I can share my screen. we talked about, which will help the work to run as well. Okay, so the line width is changed there, and what the graph relates to is turn-day warrants for the lead firm treatment, which we expressed some interest in yesterday. The corrected figure, avoided using the lines, and I put the details and numbers on there for you, which relate to the traffic counts from the ITA. So you'll see that the first figure at the bottom, which I see my cursor, is labeled 38, relates to the existing 70 lots. So a basic left turn treatment would be warranted under the existing volumes, or it's borderline. Then in the next phase, the 75 lots, 75 vehicles per hour, it relates to the return volume. This will be approved 161 lots of cashing at Oak Drive. And then you'll see off the top of the graph is scenario 1 and scenario 2. So what that essentially demonstrates is the left turn volumes are very high. And that can be related to my comments, specifically in my evidence in chief.
So if you could just provide those through Liam to us as replacement
Yes,
figures.
Sent a copy through to be printed. But,
Okay. No,
unfortunately, it was late.
That's okay. Look, we can deal with this way as long as we've got it. So can you just give us the punchline again? So at 38, that red line,
there's
what's that showing us?
38 left turners
Yes,
for the existing lots.
and if it's close to the red line, what's that telling us?
So the basic treatment or basic left turn treatment means you don't need a separate left turn treatment.
Yes,
for that
yes,
volume.
yes,
Then you transition into a intermediate treatment.
yes,
You'll see there's some figures in my evidence.
yes, yes,
For the 75, which are approved for 161.
yes, yes,
And then you'll see that the scale on the left-hand side for your left turning or QL or left turning volume goes up to 120
Yes.
vehicles per hour. The scenario 2, it's modeled at 191 vehicles turning left and 157
Okay.
turning left for the integrated option 2 or scenario 2, the retirement village.
And so we heard some residents yesterday talking about that left turn in. This is what we're talking about, was the left turn out.
That's no left turn in.
And yes, and they're feeling a bit pressured by people up their bums and then zooming past when they
That's
had the
correct.
blinker on. So yeah.
Essentially fix the flow of the state highway. Whereas on the
Yes.
side road, people just queue up behind you, so
Okay.
it's a lower speed, so it's not
Yeah.
as significant.
So it's getting close to needing a taper off to the left so they can pull
I
aside.
would say in terms of efficiency and appropriate management, yes, it should be well considered.
Yes,
One of the points made by the traffic experts for the requester was there's not enough space, which I disagree.
Mm.
If you look from a pragmatic point of view, there's actually seal space here beside the guardrail,
Mm.
which shows you there is space. You
Mm.
might need to change the drainage channel, and it's commensurate wide. It's 28 meters wide, because wider than the road.
Mm. Okay, no, that's good. Thank you.
So that's like the first correction. I think there is some line work on other figure. Correct, but that's corrected in my summary statement anyway, and superseded by my summary statement. That's figure 11. Lines that line up. It's still will be superseded by my summary. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Figure 1, is it?
Figure
Yeah,
it out.
summary.
Sorry. Figure 11.
Yeah, and your evidence sheet, but is it figure 1 in your summary?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, okay. We just say that superseded by figure 1.
okay,
Then the last one, sorry, is an appendix. Query. The data that was given to me was state highway speeds in appendix 2.
Mm.
So on page 5, it refers to northbound traffic. It's actually southbound. So page 6 refers to southbound, was actually northbound. So it doesn't make a big difference, because both the 85th percentile speeds were 74 kilometers per hour in either direction. And the difference in average speed was 63 compared to 65. So it's immaterial,
Okay.
but it is correct the other way around. And that comes from some of my figures as well in table 2. So around the long as well, but as I said, no material difference.
if we were going to cross something out and put something else on that page, page 5, where would we do that?
Sorry, page 5
Yeah, so I think I'm looking at page 5
of the appendix or the,
of the appendix.
Yep.
So that's speed statistics by hour.
Yep.
It's got northbound, that should be southbound, is that what you're saying?
that's correct.
So cross NB out and put SB in?
Yes, that's exactly what I've done. Following page, cross it, speed in the
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Move to my summary. Reading from page 1. My full name is Glenn Coley. I'm a senior road safety engineer at Welhom Valley. I've assessed the proposed plan change for the use of a 14.7 hectare site, the residential and composite retirement village scenarios. An extensive amount of information has been produced to discuss the traffic and transportation matters. This summary aims to focus on key matters and address matters raised in the hearing thus far. It should be read in conjunction with my full statement of evidence. Safety. My primary concern is safe access for all road users. The predominant means of travel to and from a site is likely to be motor vehicles. It is agreed that most drivers will travel to and from Masterton, 80%. This means there will be a significant number of drivers turning right in Cashmere Oaks Drive, for which there is a significant risk of death or serious injury, given the environment and prevailing traffic speeds. It is accepted to reduce death and serious injuries for side impact crashes, such as right turns from Cashmere Oak Drive. Collision speeds should be managed to be 50 kilometres per hour or less. The following risk profile is consistent with a safe system approach that recognises that people are vulnerable in a crash and that the road system should be designed to be forgiving. The graph clearly demonstrates the principle that crash severity rises rapidly for a side impact, such as right turn, with speeds over 50 kilometres an hour. This is demonstrated in figure 1 with a significant increase in crash risk demonstrated by the steep grade from point 8. You can see the steep grade rising from 50 kilometres per hour as speeds go above 50. Safe access is achieved in a forgiving system by managing side impact speeds for motorists to 50 kilometres an hour and vulnerable road users to 30 kilometres an hour, as demonstrated by the dashed blue lines. An urban roundabout at Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection could achieve these speeds if appropriately designed and integrated. Chance of fatality for a motorist hit from the side, for example, increases from the indicative 10% at 50 kilometres an hour, it's 0.8, to over 90% for impact speeds of 76 kilometres per hour, point B, and 84 kilometres per hour, point C. These being surveyed speeds for the northbound and southbound state highway traffic at Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection. I note the crash curves are a tool and the probability figures are not absolute. What is a concern is the shift from the low end of the scale essentially to the upper end of the scale. I am of the view that the absence of crashes is partly a reflection of the low volumes of Cashmere Drive. So statistically, an exposure point of view and potentially a good fortune. It cannot be assumed or relied upon that there will be no crashes in the future as volumes increase. The crash modelling reinforces this. Cashmere Oaks Drive is consented for 161 lots, plus it is suggested 254 residential lots for scenario 1 could see some 3,600 vehicles per day using Cashmere Oaks Drive. People make mistakes and crashes will occur, hence the need for a forgiving system for all road users. In addition to the risk for motorists, there are risks for other users, such as cyclists. The survey Strava data shows The few cyclists from Cashmere Oaks Drive using Miro Street, so you can see that by the absence of the blue and red lines in Miro Street in the picture. Noting, however, that this would be not be particularly convenient for existing users. There are cyclists using Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection, and it appears they access the recreation paths on the other eastern side of the highway. So that's shown by the blue lines coming out of Cashmere Oaks Drive, and as they transition into a slightly darker blue line, and the red line showing the road use. I note there is a little bit of cycle use on Coralie Place, but nothing really connecting through to Miro Street as well.
You're going to have to help me with this, I'm afraid. It's blurry on your sheet and it's blurry on the screen. So just slowly take us through what we're doing. Do you have a mouse there that you could help us with?
Yes, I've got the mouse. So if you can see, the red indicates volume. So there are in terms of the volumes that are
These are
the
cyclists.
highest volumes are on the state highway, possibly on the local road around here, for example, because of the bandwidth and the width. The lesser volumes coming down to a narrow bandwidth, and then what you expect because of the catchment is a modest volume narrow, which is the full colour blue. And you can see that the location of the lines, and if you zoom in, you can sort of see a little more detail, sort of tracked them in on the actual location. It's not particularly easy for the cyclists. That's slightly better for the pedestrian and dark that we have. As you can see, it's not interspersed with the state highway volumes, which sort of blur the outcome. So from a simple point of view, you can see Miro Street is not being used at all because there's no colour whatsoever. There's a little bit of use in Coralie Place, which probably relates to the local users, up and down there, and they increase as they accumulate on Cashmere Oaks Drive with the darker colours. You can see some movement to the left, and some of that movement coming around from the left as they come back in from Masterton as well. So you'd expect, as you can see from the walking data, that people do actually cross the road and access the recreational pathways over here as well.
Is that right hand sort of blue loop that's coming
This
down?
one through here,
Use your mouse. Yes.
I think that's it's at Meadow Oaks Drive, and then the link, this is the pathway here. So this is Meadow Oaks Drive here. This is the side road.
Okay. So we've heard the evidence about the new walking cycling way between Cashmere Oaks and Miro Street about to be opened.
Yes,
So would you expect to see some more people walking and biking along Miro Street with that?
yes, I would say yes. Would. I had a look and think that if you connect from the proposed cul-de-sac, then that is likely that you would use that. It's an uphill track to get onto Cashmere Oaks Drive, and you've got the highway. So I as a cyclist, I would use it.
Yes.
There is the potential for I think it's a legal access connecting to
Yes.
Roger Renan Ave as well,
Yes.
which would provide a convenient link potentially for pedestrians and cyclists.
Yes.
That route would potentially be 300 metres shorter than the Miro Street.
Yes.
So it could potentially influence cyclists who are less interested in a recreational route. They may choose, like I do, I bike on main roads, so it's the direct and shortest route. So I think yes, it's a good alternative. I don't necessarily agree that everybody will use it. I think there's inevitably some use that will occur on the state highway, particularly, and also the access to the recreational tracks on the side, which is evident in the Strava data.
Okay.
And I do note the walkway is not there at the moment, so the Strava data probably doesn't recognise that link that goes
Yes.
through. It's being built in the second stages.
Yes.
But that would not change my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's in paragraph 11.
Yes.
The risk of pedestrians at Cashmere Oak Drive intersection is limited to those that would cross the highway, as the existing footpath network caters for other destinations. So if you're going into town, for example, you use the pathway on the near side, and it doesn't matter that there's not on the other side, for example. The survey Strava data for pedestrians shows the Coralie Place link and Miro route, street route being used. So if you have a look now at the footer, you can see that Miro Street is actually being used on both sides of the road. And there's a reasonably strong blue line coming through Coralie Place through the little link that we talked,
Yep.
that was talked about yesterday. Even though there's no footpath through there, to share the right of way. As you said, walkers will ferret out their way through their work. What is of interest is if you can have a look at the data, because you don't have that big bold line on the highway, you can clearly see that there are some pedestrians who come left out of Catchment Oaks and then cross the road, and you can see much clearer the link into Meadow Oaks Drive and back into the recreational festival, which shows like the use in the
Thank you.
It also shows pedestrian crossing and walking along the highway to access the facilities on the eastern side of Highway Line Opaki Meadows Drive. Which I just explained. Paragraph 12, the new link to Miro Street does provide an alternative. Just talked about this. However, some cyclists may choose to use the highway, and the facility on the eastern side of the highway will attract more pedestrians and cyclists as development occurs. These effects should not be discounted given the severe consequence should crashes here. Like the DSI. Requesters experts suggest that it is not appropriate to cross the highway on this location, which I agree with. Nonetheless, people are doing this, and crossing the highway is likely to increase with development of the site. Move to the lower speed limit. It's been suggested that the state that the requesters, traffic experts state that a lower speed limit is not necessary, but would be supported. Furthermore, that this is a matter for the road control authority to address. Consultation has been completed for the ISMP in December 2022 for the review of the 100km/h speed limit from Masterton, the 9km section north, as per before. Noting this commences at the 50km/h speed limit. This is one of your questions. The purpose of this review is to address head-on and loss of control crashes, which are the main safety concern for DSIs on 100km/h roads. This is demonstrated on the crash risk curves that show 60% reduction in probability of a fatality for head-on crashes when collision speeds reduce from 100km/h to 80km/h. So you can see that's the orange line just going from point A to point B. So the reduction from 100km/h, 80km/h is indicative 60% reduction in DSI. It's the 9km section. You suggested for line to 80km/h.
You're looking at figure 5 at the moment.
Yes, so if you look at the orange line.
Yes, I've got the orange line.
Yep, so the reduction from 100 to 80 is indicated by the blue band,
Yes.
and the reduction in probability goes from point A, which is 100%, top of the scale.
Yes, okay, gotcha.
B, which is 40%.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
The reduction in probability of a fatality or side impact, which is the dark blue curve. And point C goes from essentially the top of the scale to somewhere between 95 and 100%. So there's less than 5% effect on probability of a fatality. The reduction from 100 to 80 for side impacts. And at point D, in terms of pedestrians and cyclists, which is the red curve, reducing it to 80km/h has little to negligible effect. The risk, the probability of a death or serious injury. So essentially that graph reinforces that reducing it from 100 to 80 addresses head-on crashes, and that's its primary purpose.
And that the side impact is still a live issue.
Sorry?
And the side impact issue is still very much live in your view.
Yes, well, it only reduces it by 5%, so it's only just starting to touch influence side impact. hence my concern. Paragraph 16. The management of speeds has been reviewed to provide integrated speed management to assist lower the road toll in accordance with international best practice. This is in line with the safe system approach. This gave rise to the Land Transport Setting Speed Limit Rule 2022. The rule and supporting speed management guide requires speed limits that are safe and appropriate. State Highway 2 near the site, in my opinion, would have a rural appearance to drivers. Sector 6. The houses in Cashmere Oaks on the right hand side, you can see in the image, are screened entirely by trees. But also, there are no vehicle crossings as you'd expect in an urban environment. There's no curb and channel, nor footpath or lighting, as is typical on an urban environment. My observation, travelling, floating car, travelling along there, the observed speeds, you can see in the picture, and the average speeds are 80 to 82 kilometres an hour, and 85th percentile speeds from 91 to 93 kilometres per hour. The photograph that you're seeing is actually near the location of the traffic counter.
Near Hansel's there.
So in floating, it's my observation is they are reasonably representative of what you expect over the survey period at normal physical vehicle.
And you've got the northbound and southbound correct there.
That one was okay.
Yes.
And I'll comment on that further because yes, I did struggle with the other one. As well, years.
Okay.
Now, in terms of transitioning, I'd note there is a footpath between Cashmere Oaks Drive and 4th Street as it transitions into the urban environment, as per 7. Now, again, this is roughly where the traffic counters were located for the site surveys just south of Cashmere Oaks Drive. So it's not far. I think it's only about 50 metres. They were only about 50 metres from the 50 kilometre per hour signs. Average speeds there were 63 and 65 kilometres per hour. Southbound and northbound, I'm just checking. No, they're in the wrong way. And 74 and 74 for the others, which they're in the right because they're the same. What I would note is that the speeds from the prior site at about 80 to 90 kilometres per hour are still high, much higher than you'd expect in an urban environment. Even here, the 85th percentile speeds are quite a bit higher than the 50 kilometre per hour speed limit.
And the reason I had a bit of a furrowed brow when we were talking yesterday afternoon about this,
yes,
was it's really the impact in my mind anyway of the Avida development coming north to south around that corner, and it's a pretty intense urban development.
It is noticeable, and what I would say is that the land is one indicator.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm saying, if you take, for example, Cashmere Oaks Drive, there's a heck of a lot of residential development.
But it's
if you
hidden.
can't see it,
Yes.
it doesn't influence the driver on the road.
Yes.
The other question I'd had for the Arvida, I think they intended to put up a acoustic fence, and if they landscape as well, then the housing that you see, which will give you the impression of urban development
Yes.
of the land, could then be screened and lessen the effect of that urban impact. Whereas what you should be looking for, I think, is if you look at this next slide, I start talking about the interface when you hit 4th Street. There's a clear interface between what I would say is rural and the urban environment, where your cars start, your curb and channel lighting, your vehicle crossings, your urban vehicle crossings, all that stuff that you can speak in the urban environment is what influences drivers to slow down. Talk more about it up what follows.
No, okay, I think that's useful. The figure 6 is downstream of the Avida, so it doesn't capture that, does it, at the moment? Like your figure 6.
Figure 6 is quite so
That's right.
North of Cashmere Oaks, so yes,
Yes,
it's
but
downstream of Arvida. So
yes.
it has captured that.
Yeah.
It's beyond the Arvida side.
I wonder whether the council team, a little bit more homework, the consent conditions on Avida with the screening.
The document that's been circulated.
Okay, well, maybe if one of you could have a look while we're talking and give us a reference, that would be good. Okay.
They might not be the most updated conditions because it went to the environment court.
Oh, okay.
And was resolved by consent order. So we have more updated to the condition, and I can really provide that.
Yeah, if you could do that, Glenn, that'd be great. Just the screening conditions, because I think what Glenn's saying is irrelevant.
I can
Point.
definitely help with that. I think Mr. Ryan Rose in the room earlier, so
Yes.
he and I worked extensively around that screening condition and the acoustic fence. I was with the Waka Kotahi to help look at making sure that the conditions were complied with.
Mm.
And indeed, there is quite a large fence required right along the front boundary of the other side, so all the housing will be fence.
Plus landscape on the side, the roadside.
There was meant to be landscaping on the roadside, but there were hazards with having to maintain that, so I believe that landscaping got removed and it's now on the back side of the fence.
Okay,
So what will be evident from the state highway
Yes.
will be a full fence.
yes,
With top beyond that.
okay. Well, I think we don't, that's enough for us in terms of
Right.
evidence.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt. I have video and images that we could look at, but essentially, Arvida, as I said, the house is set back. The road still has a sealed shoulder, no curb channel. It's the road environment still looks
Mm.
very rural. From
Yes,
my perspective on traffic engineering or road engineering.
yes, okay. No, as I said, yes, you're the expert and this is, you deal with this every day.
Yeah.
So appreciate your view. Mm.
So if you refer to figure 8, this demonstrates an aerial photograph where the vehicle speeds are located. And you'll see that I have consistently incorrectly labelled the speed for the average at nearly 50 kilometres per hour. So 65 and 63 should be the other way around. Just to give you some context. And you can see that the Arvida site is beyond that. So the influence of Arvida as it would have been when the counts were done in November 22, I think they were. Check that. So the influence of Arvida as it was at the time of the counts would have affected these statistics. Noting that I think there's been quite a bit of development there.
Mm.
Then, as I was saying, paragraph 19, 4th Street provides a clear demarcation for a change in road environment with houses, vehicle crossings and urban infrastructure. That's level 9. Hence the current position of the 50 km/h speed limits in the existing ones. The large repeater signs, which you can see here, either side of the road, quite unusual. It's not unusual repeater signs, but there are actually 2 here. They've got backing boards that are quite large. And there's another 2, I think, down by Miro Street, and there's another 2 repeated again further beyond that. I think it's in somewhere in 2nd Street, which to me indicates a problem with speeding. State Highway 2 is classed as an interregional connector. These roads provide safe, reliable and efficient movement of people and goods between regions and strategic centres in a rural context. A safe and appropriate speed for which is between 60 and 110 kilometres per hour. The default safe and appropriate speed limit for an interregional connector is 80, and a lower speed limit of 60 is not warranted, given the amount of access, form of the highway and geometry of the road. There is the potential for the road to be reclassified in the area as the road changes. A peri-urban road, for example, primarily provides access for residential property in the urban fringe, where the predominant adjacent land use is residential, but usually at a lower density than in the urban residential locations. The speed limit for these roads will be between 50 and 80 kilometres an hour. Even if the highway were passed as a peri-urban road, however, a safe and appropriate speed would still be 80 kilometres an hour, given the prevailing environment. That is the amount of development accessing the road, sufficient lane with straight alignment, high levels of delineation, for example. Accordingly, I am of the view that speed limit lower than 80 kilometres per hour could not readily be achieved in accordance with setting of speed limits for the current proposed developments. It's based on the current environment. I refer to intersection enhancements suggested, paragraph 23. The request of safety experts have suggested that minor enhancements can be made to the intersection. In my view, these will have little effect on the fundamental crash risk associated with speeds. I address this from paragraphs 106 to 107 of my evidence in chief. This is supported by the views of Mr. Landon Lane, who confirmed these changes do not affect the modelling. The minor safety enhancements suggested include maintenance matters and treatments that are more consistent with the rural road environment. Enhancements include nothing that addresses speed, which is the primary influence on crash severity, as previously discussed. Nor do they support the transition to a lower speed environment, which is integral, in my view, providing safe access to the road network. With regard to the safe system treatment philosophy, the requested safety experts have stated that under a safe system treatment philosophy, a safe system transformation, in other words, a larger cost infrastructure work, is not warranted given the expected safety performance of the catchment intersection. A roundabout is considered in the standard safety intervention toolkit, streamlined investment pathway dated September 2021, but no longer specifically identifies roundabouts as a safe system transformation treatment. So if you look at the figures that we used and referred to, the requesters traffic experts, safe system transformation is this large cost where they're talking about high collective risk and higher personal risk. So as we've sort of talked about tools, this is rather blunt. So what I refer to in paragraph 27, a roundabout has an indicative cost of $0.5 million, $6 million. With my opinion being that the cost of the urban size roundabout could be at the lower end in this location, because that range allows for rural high speed roundabouts as well. Furthermore, the standard safety intervention criteria for a roundabout are as follows. For the project to meet the criteria for the streamlined investment pathway, the total project cost must fall between the applicable cost range and meet the criteria below. Intersection collective risk is medium to high to greater. 3 or more injury crashes in a 5-year period. The treatment threshold relates to 3 or more injury crashes in a 5-year period, which includes minor injuries. This is much lower threshold than the 3 DSI deaths or injury crashes suggested by the requesters traffic experts and discussed in previously in the hearing. 3 right turn injury crashes, for example, that are minor injuries, would have an equivalent DSI of 0.96 to 1.1, as opposed to the 3 suggested. The safe system treatment philosophy is a reactive tool intended to target road funding where it can have greatest effect at reducing DSI, existing DSIs in line with the GPS and road safety strategy. The thresholds for investment should not, in my opinion, be an indication of acceptance of crash risk and or road trauma, but a pragmatic indication of finite funding. The safe system treatment philosophy is founded on a safe system approach, which indicates that a high proportion of death and serious injury crashes occur on roads where we have with no other injuries, and that a proactive approach is needed. The proposed development will generate a substantial amount of traffic and increase the number of crashes at the Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection. There is an inherent risk that a crash could result in severe consequences. It's a death or serious injury, given the prevailing speeds. This, in my view, is a significant adverse effect that remains to be addressed. Just before I finish off, I think there was a question. There's a delay. There was a question about traffic volumes on the bypass route, so I've given you those for your reference. I think there was also a comment about 3rd Street or an interest in 3rd Street. So if you want to put that in context, it carries about 1,360 vehicles per day. The data is obtained from mobileroads.org. It's a website which picks up RAM data from essentially road control and authority databases. So it should provide a consistent comparison of 7-day averages. In conclusion, paragraph 33, it is accepted that land use is changing. Plan change, in my view, does not demonstrate how the development can safely and effectively be integrated into the transport network. There are no current plans for the road environment change and transition to an urban road environment with lower speeds and safe access. It has not been demonstrated, in my opinion, that the proposed plan change for urban use of the site can mitigate the adverse effects, particularly as they relate to safe access to the strategic road network for all the road users.
Thank you,
I did
Glenn.
have one other comment. I think there is yesterday there was some discussion around the accuracy of the traffic modelling. Would you like me to comment on that?
Yes, yes, please.
So I quickly put this together. Essentially, there are some concerns. So I think I might have said there's some questioning comments there, but there are some fundamental parameters in terms of the modelling. So, for example, the state highway growth, that's one of the inputs to the model. 2% growth was adopted for 10 years. A review of the 29 to 22 counts, so for those traffic counts either side of Cashmere Oaks Drive, was counted in 2019 and 2022, shows a 4 to 5% increase in traffic growth over that 3-year period. So there's a potential risk there because of the real residential environment and increased growth in that particular area rather than strategic count sites that indicate a 2% growth locally and closer to Cashmere Oak Drives. In my view, we need to take the traffic growth with a bit of caution and possibly consider a higher traffic growth rate, particularly if that rural residential development is likely to continue. For the morning generation rate, the traffic experts for the requester have used a 0.7 vehicles per hour per dwelling. I've indicated that this is low in terms of industry standards and should be considered that way with a degree of caution. The 0.9 vehicles per hour per dwelling, which I've suggested, is not entirely based on the one count that they've suggested, but aligns with the daily traffic volume, which is indicative of around 8.7 daily trips. So normally the peak hours are around a tenth of that, so the 0.9 lines up well with that as well. So I'd sort of suggest this degree of conservatism is normal in modelling, and that should be taken into account as well. The gap selection modelling, the original figures put in the ITA were 38 seconds for the delay for the right turn in the morning hour, which was a level of service E. I note that this has been revised with the gap selection. It has been explained by Mr. Georgeson about why that is the case, but note that the delay for the right turners reduces to an average of 16 seconds, which is a substantial reduction. But that highlights the impact of the assumptions associated with gap selection. So when you look at all those figures, I might agree with Mr. Georgeson that it could be a variation of 10% lower, but I would suggest that the higher figures could be much more than 10%. And with those margins that you've got there, significantly higher than 10%, and I would consider it prudent to take that into account when assessing the impacts.
So the percentages down the left-hand side, what are they?
So the 100% relates to 2 to 4, so going from 2% to 4,
Oh,
100%
okay.
different.
Yes,
0.7 to 0.9 is a 30% increase,
yes.
and then reduce it from 38 seconds to what would be 19 seconds is half. So roughly 50% is a reduction of roughly.
So that's a reduction where the other ones are increases.
Yeah.
Right. So we would like to have that as well, you know, in terms of everything that's been provided to us. Maybe just put a minus 50% in that last figure, just to, so we don't get confused. Okay,
So it's
David.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Conley. I've been furiously writing notes and listening intently, so that's been very useful. I've got 2 questions of clarification and then a more substantive question following that. So in terms of the first question of clarification, can I just take you to your paragraph 22 in your summary? Yes, page 9. And here you're dealing with, I mean, you've been dealing with the ISMP speed reviews and reductions, and we heard from Ms. Spate earlier about the time frame for that.
yes.
Have you got any doubt that that will actually occur, or is that a given?
No, yes or no answer. No, I'm reasonably confident that
Yeah.
it will occur.
Yes.
There has been submissions that the length should be shortened. So coming back from my package, they're not going up to final rate.
Right.
So the 80k, I think, is reasonably well.
Yes. And what about in the other direction? What's the nature of the submissions south of Cashmere Oaks Drive?
So in that specific area,
Yes,
the submissions from the Cashmere Oaks residents group of people, 40, I think, and
Yes.
they wanted to run a speed limit as well.
yes,
And also Somerset submitted suggesting the lower speed limit is appropriate, but as it outlined, because the environment and it's unlikely to be respected by road users, and that's why it's important to actually integrate with that in the environment.
yes,
And that's dictated by legislation.
yes. So a decision in the next month to be implemented by the 1st of July 2024, I think the state said.
Yes, I
Yes.
think that was the same for the 2024 plan, so.
Yes,
I
Yes.
queried it was 23 or 24. I can follow it up here if you like.
in your hands there.
And then the infrastructure changes I think we talked about is relatively minor. It's
Yes.
really just the speed signs.
Yes. So that would be a change from 100 to 80 at that current speed sign heading out of Masterton.
Yes.
Yes.
Sign on the back, which says 100.
Yes.
To 80. Just a couple of 80s. 9 k's out or
Yes.
the distance if that is.
Yes. So apologies if this sounds like a dumb question, but what will be the speed environment in the 150-metre stretch between to the south of Cashmere Oaks Drive?
The same. It's all part of the same.
Okay.
I think it uses Cashmere Oaks Drive as a rough location.
Yes.
That's the indication.
Yes.
Then the legally defined.
Yes. So it'll be okay. So that's the demarcation of the change from 50 to 80.
It's that's not the current 50.
Yes. Down here. Thank you. Yes. Okay. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying in paragraph 22. Yet I'm of view that a speed limit lower than 80 could not readily be achieved in accordance with the current or proposed development. What section of road are you talking about there?
So that's the suggestion, there was a suggestion that the speed limit can be lowered from a metre through to 50.
Okay,
700-metre section.
okay,
What I'm saying is coming down to 80, that's more than likely.
Yes.
I agree, but getting it much lower can suggest that I can't see that happening. You can't do that. Setting a speed limit.
yes. You're not questioning the likely abeyance of the 80, the future 80 speed limit, are you?
No.
Thank you. That's clarified that. The next clarification was on your paragraph 26 through to 28. And I guess I was a little bit surprised to hear that it's no longer that it's a standing and talk, it no longer specifically identifies roundabouts. There's a transformational treatment.
It's not in the bubble.
Yes,
So it's probably a reflection of the cost. So if you look at the cost,
yes,
if you've got a 0.5, $500,000 roundabout, it might be a lot easier to achieve than $6 million roundabout. So that's why I say it was rather a blunt tool.
Mm.
So what you should be doing is looking at the roundabout specifics, which is what I referred to subsequently.
yes. As a transportation specialist and engineer, do you consider it to be a transformational type of intervention around
So
that?
that's different.
Yes.
So essentially that's reducing the speed and the angle, which has a substantial impact on injuries.
Yes.
And severity.
Yes. Thank you for that. I thought that was your view, but I wanted to confirm that. There's a number of other questions I could ask you, but I really just wanted to jump to the sort of the crux of the matter. And it's about that fundamental issue I raised at the beginning of the hearing. And I'll read the question out because I've written it down because I think it's important. And it's, do you consider whether the transportation effects of this plan change, particularly the safety effects at Cashmere Oaks Drive, and within that, particularly the right-hand turnout, which you've identified as a particular issue, and a particular issue because of the increase in vehicles per day up to 3,600, I think, under the worst case scenario, the scenario 1, I think. Do you consider those effects? And I guess just also acknowledging you made a comment on the left-hand turn being potentially remedied through a taper, and you thought there was sufficient room within the road reserve to deal with that. Do you consider those effects of such magnitude that the further urbanisation of this site and locality just shouldn't be contemplated at all?
No. If there is safe, I've said all the way through my evidence, if you can provide safe and appropriate access and integrated with the appropriate infrastructure, then I'd say yes, you can develop the site.
Yes.
The effects,
Yes. Thank you for that. Appreciate that clarification. I think it's an important one, because that leads on to the next question, and it's a question I'll have for Ms. St. Armand, is because that answers the first question about, is there any fundamental impediment? And I said on day one, and I repeated it early with your legal counsel, that if the answer to that is yes, then I pull stumps now and leave.
if you talk to engineers, most of the time, if you've got enough money, you can fix the problem.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So that takes it through into the no category, that no, there is no impediment, and therefore the focus needs to be quite squarely on the adequacy of the provisions of the plan change to manage those and mitigate those effects. You agree? I know you're not a planner.
take advice, but yes,
Yes.
from a lay person's perspective,
Yes.
yes, I agree.
And therefore, the issue therefore is what is the appropriate process for dealing with that? And you probably given your answer already, and that it's one that is integrated and has the most appropriate intersection.
Yes.
Yes. Putting aside funding considerations, which I don't say are unimportant, but they are something that we need to consider separately. So then the issue is, what would that process look like? What would that resource consent process look like? And St. Armand has indicated that it would not be a controlled activity. It would involve the input of Waka Kotahi. It might involve a structure plan, and that structure plan may give a nod to the type of interventions that are needed, maybe in terms of a stage development. Whether it can deal with funding is a moot point, and possibly not, but that's Ms. Armand's professional opinion as a planner.
Yes.
You understand what she's suggesting?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As I indicated, but yes.
Engineers and planners.
but the Lewandowski has a different view. He has a view that resource consent process is still necessary, and I'm focusing predominantly on the retirement village, but I acknowledge Mr. Armand's concerns with the activity status interpretation issue on subdivision. He believes that a controlled activity, because it lists matters of discretion that include things like, that's not the matters of discretion, matters of control that include things like, let me just go to them. Amendments. Yes. The provision of things such as improvements and alterations to the roads, particularly safety improvements to the intersection of State Highway 2 and Cashmere Oaks Drive. He believes that those matters of control, along with information that records the outcomes of consultation with Waka Kotahi, are sufficient and are, in his view, an appropriate process. So it's a clear difference of opinion between the two planners. Putting that to one side, given that you said that there is a potential fix and it involves integration, and that Waka Kotahi should be in the tent, so to speak. Are you happy to leave it to the planners to decide what the best solution is, so long as the ability to achieve that integrated solution is not compromised?
Yes or no, so yes, I would rely on your professional expertise.
Yes.
What I would say is, from my experience and working in the fields, working with planners and working for a road control authority.
Yes.
at the plan change stage, I would have expected the big picture stuff to be sorted out and the
Yes.
details to be sorted out, resource consent.
Yes.
And in my view, a lot of big picture stuff hasn't been sorted out. There's a lot of under issues about not only state highway, but how those links are put together and how it's integrated.
Yes.
So that's probably in a simple view of
Yes.
things and how I see it.
Yes, although you did answer earlier that those big picture issues are not such as to just pull up stumps and go away now. That there is the ability to deal with those through a future process. I think I heard you say.
Yes, but there might be other processes as well. So, for example, the speed limit process.
Yes.
A whole lot of other stuff which might affect time. And
Yes.
that's where the planners can sort out the
Yes.
problems.
All we know about the speed limit is that it's highly likely that if this plan change was to be approved, by the time any future resource consent was prepared and lodged, it's highly likely that a reduction from 80 to 100 to 80 is going to be in place for the area north of Cashmere Oaks Drive.
But that has no material effect on the intersection. It's really about head-ons and loss.
Well,
it's
yes.
So that goes both ways. It's not important to the decision.
Yes, I think I recorded that. I think you said something about there's a reduction of 60% on head-ons. The
80%, yes,
Yes. Yes,
for head-ons.
but it does very little, 5%.
Yeah, so it doesn't sort our problem out. It really is
Yeah.
a little
No.
consideration.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification for me.
Yes.
You mentioned that 80, speed limit of 80 north of Cashmere Oaks Drive. I think the situation is it would be a speed limit of 80 at the current 50k sign north.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
yes, I did say that. I did
Yes,
say that.
Yes.
So south of at
Yes.
Cashmere Oaks Drive.
We have
What's the dimension? Do you know
well, it's
for that?
speed limit,
Yeah.
the current location. It's from what I measured, 135 metres from the centre line of Cashmere.
Yeah.
Oaks Drive.
I had a range of 120 to 150 on evidence that had come in.
That'd be
through-
both sides of the
Yeah.
reserve.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Happy to take your 135.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
David.
No, that's fine. Okay. Well, that's really the end of my question, because that's really the entree to my questions to Catherine. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Glenn. I just have a couple. Looking at your figure 10.
Yes.
So my read of the evidence from Melanie Mewson yesterday was that we're sitting in this low to medium personal risk and low to medium collective risk band.
Yes.
And that, by the way, I read that led her to saying it's a safety management outcome, not a safe system transformation outcome, which you need highs or medium highs and above to lead you to that outcome. Is that how you read what she was saying, or you listened to her?
So that given the metrics that will put you in the safety management area.
Yes.
Yes, but it's a reasonably blunt tool, and it's looking only from the crash perspective, from historical perspective as well. I know she's forecast the expected crash rate as well. There's a lot more to think about than just that.
Yes.
The integration with the speed limit, and I also think there's a severe consequence associated with it.
Yes.
Plus, the context for the roundabout goes beyond this blunt tool and safety intervention toolkit, which looks in more detail about where that might be applied. And the threshold for that is 3 injury crashes, for example. The reason for that is that a fatal and serious crash are far and few between.
Yes.
You can use minor injury crashes as well as an indicator of risk, so to avoid that statistical risk that they haven't actually turned up, which is why the threshold of 3 is there. And that's sort of, I thought you might ask, so that's why I gave you the indicative correlation for 1 PSI.
In paragraph 29. That's where you do that, I think, of your summary statement.
Yes, end of paragraph 39. Looks like the right turn out. If there were 3 right turn out crashes, for example, it would have an equivalent PSI of 0.96 using the equivalent calculations.
Okay, well, I'm still struggling a little bit with this graph, if this is the toolkit, to get up into that right hand, top
So-
right hand
So what I would,
area.
what I'm suggesting is that as the toolkit in principle,
Yes,
that's the overarching. If you look down into the detail, you should be looking at what it's saying about a roundabout treatment, for example. You
yes,
shouldn't write off the roundabout as the umbrella treatment. You should be looking at the actual details and how you use and implement it. Especially in this context with a lower cost.
yes. Okay, that was my next question. We've heard that that's the range, and I've seen some big roundabouts built around Hawke's Bay recently. Seems to be roundabout city up there. So you're thinking, we heard, I think, from the requester that it was in the order of 5 to 6 million was in his sites. Or maybe it was 2 to 3. I don't want to put words.
5 to 6.
5 to 6 for the figure. What would be your best estimate, given the fact that we're restrained? It'll be a 3-legged roundabout,
Yes.
and you're constrained by road width with a steep bank on the other
So
side.
there's a discussion around using an urban roundabout.
Urban roundabout? Yes.
This in the barn has got some figures, 3 to 4 million. I actually, having been involved in design and looking at, I know we've built urban roundabouts for $500,000 or $600,000. I'd expect it to be much more than that.
Mm.
I'd be interested in digging a bit deeper. I would have thought at the lower end, which is what I said in my
Mm.
evidence, it might be the $1.5 million, but you'd have to dig deeper into that. I'd need to do more work and then deal with the figures that I've got.
Could you do that for us, please?
Yes, I can.
It is quite an important matter. Because I've seen the little bump in the middle of the road and the low cost urban roundabout where you're scooting around a bit of a hump, and then there's a whole range, aren't there?
Yeah. But it
Yes.
depends what's been included, how much that changes in
Yes.
backwards from the existing
Yes.
structure and.
Yes. Could you give me a range plus or minus 20% of what would be a
A bit rougher than that.
rougher than that?
I understand.
Yes, yes. And Liam, if that can obviously come through to us as information, fully knowing that Glenn's probably going to have to test it with some colleagues and.
So you'll know from Australia, if you think about some surroundings.
Yes.
Building expressways.
Yes,
Substantially more than.
yes. And there's some Marine Parade, for example,
Yes.
and State Highway 2 North, just through sort of that Pandora area. There's 3-lane roundabouts that are built much smaller.
The big one over the bridge here is probably larger than we need as well. So
Yes.
it's a good context.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
bigger than the smaller ones on the local roads.
Yes, yes. Look, I think that is a fact, I won't call it factual, but as a estimate that we could have in our mind, that would be helpful.
I understand the answer will depends, it depends, but I'll do the best I can.
Thank you, that's great. Thank you, and thank you for your assistance.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's the same. I might.
Yes, look, I think we do need to take a quick comfort stop. We've been going for a while, so let's just have a break for 5 minutes. I am tempted to have lunch, but I think let's just get through this and we'll have a late lunch, and then we can let the staff team have a bit more time and come back after that. Okay?
So